Well, hey there, and good evening. Tonight, we are looking at the book of Joshua. I almost forgot what I was going to say. Hey, but before we get started, let's go ahead and open up in prayer. Father, I just thank you for what you're doing through this study. I thank you, Lord, for the ease of it. I thank you for being able to understand it. And Lord, I just thank you for the guy who wrote it. And I thank you for the person who gave it to me. I just ask that you would bless them. And I just pray, Lord, that you would open our hearts and minds to what you would have us to learn as we go through the book of Joshua. And it's in your name I pray. Amen. Well, tonight we look at the book of Joshua. You know, the theme of the book of Joshua is conquest. If you have joined us in the past, then you know that we started in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. Currently, right now, we are following the Israelites. When they have left Egypt, God brought them out of Egypt and has taken them through the wilderness. Of course, they spent 40 years in the wilderness. And now Moses has passed away. He had turned over the reins to Joshua, and Joshua is getting ready to lead them into the promised land. Now, if you remember before, that when God had brought them to the promised land and Moses had sent out 12 spies to go check it out, to tell them how it was, remember that 10 of those guys came back, a bunch of crybabies, and said, there's no way we can do it. We're going to get beat. We're going to get killed. Only 2 guys said that they could go in there because they believed that God was with them. And so as a result, the masses listened to the 10 who said that they couldn't do it, and they ended up staying in the wilderness a lot longer than they thought they were ever going to. Well, now's another chance to test that, to test their faith, to see if they believe that God is in fact with them and will go into the promised land with them. And Joshua is leading the charge. And we will find the Israelite people camped out on the east side of the Jordan River as they're fixing to go in and take over Jericho. And this is going to be a real test for them, because when they get to Jericho, they're going to be given instructions that are going to be things that, well, quite honestly, we wouldn't think to do. We would think they're ridiculous. We would think they're silly. Who marches around a wall 7 times? I mean, that doesn't even make sense. What's that going to do? And you can imagine that the people that were watching them walk around the wall every day, we're looking down at them and sneering and making comments, and the things that they were saying, ridicule and so on, had to, at some point in time, get to some of them. But they stayed obedient, which was a really good thing, and they passed the test. The author of the book of Joshua is Joshua, and the date written is sometime between 1405 BC and 1385 BC. And of course, our setting, where we find them, is in the land of Canaan, fixing to go into the promised land, which would be the land of Canaan. Now, when Moses had passed that baton on to Joshua for leadership, that was in Deuteronomy 34, Israel was at the end of its 40 years of wilderness wanderings. Praise the Lord, right? Joshua had been the faithful apprentice for most of that 40 years, and he was approaching 90 years of age. 90 years when Moses calls him to become Israel's new leader. Well, Joshua's task is to lead Israel into the land of Canaan, drive out the inhabitants, and then divide that land for the 12 tribes, to divide it among the 12 tribes of Israel. So let's look at the skeleton of the book of Joshua. Chapters 1 through 5, we have preparation for conquering the land. In the book that bears his name, Joshua, opens with the people of Israel on the plains of Moab, east of the Jordan River, and they are preparing spiritually, morally, and physically for the conquest of the land. Joshua and the Israelites are facing various peoples on the western side of the Jordan who make up a formidable and fierce enemy, and they live inside heavily fortified cities. You got to remember that Jericho we hear so much about, but that's not the only place that the Israelites are going to go in and have to battle against. God will give Israel the land by conquest, primarily to fulfill the covenant He pledged to Abraham and his descendants, but also to pass judgment on the sinful inhabitants of those lands because they had become so steeped in their wickedness. And that reference would be from Genesis 15:16. Now, the conquest begins in a fashion similar to the Exodus. The people first have to cross a body of water. Now, if you remember from Exodus, the people had to cross the Red Sea, and God parted the Red Sea so that they could cross. And of course, if you remember Pharaoh's guys, when Pharaoh changed his mind about letting the people go, if you remember, Pharaoh and his guys, all his chariots, chased the Israelites, and I'm sure they thought, hey, the Red Sea's parted. This is perfect. Imagine, among other thoughts that they thought, like, holy cow, the Red Sea is parted. Like, wow. And then they went in thinking they're going to cross, and pursue the Israelites. And of course, they all drowned. But as God parted the Red Sea, God holds back the waters of the Jordan River. This is the second body of water that the people of Israel, that God holds back, and the army of God passes through on dry ground. Well, chapters 6 through 12 talk about conquering that land. The army is poised. They're ready to begin battle to gain this promised land. And Israel's first test is as the people are asked to let God provide the victory at the large and fortified city of Jericho. Nothing like starting off with the big thing first, right? Well, the people are asked to walk around the city for 7 days. Once a day for the first 6 days. Don't say anything. Just walk around this city once a day for 6 days. And then on the 7th day, I want you to walk around 7 times. And then at the end, I want you to scream. I think by then, personally, I'd have been ready to scream. But I want you to think about this for a moment. As I was looking at this, one of the things that struck me is, when we think about walking around a city, I think in my mind, I originally thought we're walking around the block. And how long is that going to take? Okay, we'll just walk around the block and then we're done. We're talking about a city, a big city back then. We're talking about walking around this fortified city, this wall that's all the way around it. And that's going to take a little while. That's not going to just be a 5-minute jaunt. I can't imagine that it's just going to take a short amount of time to do that. And so as being asked to walk around that city, I'm being asked to step out in faith. I mean, when I think about this, I would be being asked to step out in faith and walk around the city, not really understanding, why am I doing this? What am I doing? I don't understand why we're walking around the outside of a city. That would just be, I think, my mindset about this situation is I'm walking around the outside of a city, and these people are, could be spitting on my head, throwing stuff at me, saying stupid stuff. I mean, making comments and things. And I'm supposed to just be calm and walk around for 6 days. And then on the 7th day, I got to do this 7 times. And I'm thinking, okay, this is more than a 5-minute walk, and I'm going to be walking around 7 times. And how long did it take them to do that? And did some of them want to say, this is ridiculous. Why are we doing this? And they want to step out of line. And maybe some of them want to go back. And maybe some of them are questioning, but we're told in the Bible that they did it. They did it. And the walls on the 7th, after they screamed, come down and they go in and they conquer. This campaign in central Canaan drives a strategic wedge between the northern and southern cities, which prevents a massive alliance from forming against Israel. So you have to think Joshua went in, when they went into Jericho, they went in through the middle. That city being in the middle of the all the land that they're going to conquer. So you had land on the north, you had people on the north, and you had people on the south. How strategic was that? That's God, right? To lead them to that city, to where they have the unique position to be able to attack the north and attack the south. How cool is that? Well, chapters 13 through 22 talk about the allocation of the land, because now that we've gone in and we've conquered these different lands, now we have to allocate it to the 12 tribes of Israel. So 7 years has gone by and the conquest is now complete. And God tells Joshua, it's time to divide the land among the 12 tribes. And those divisions are allotted, and the tribes are to continue to their final conquest in their assigned areas. So it wasn't that, okay, I'm giving you this land and you've got nothing else to do. No, there's still people there that you need to go in and conquer. And why would that be? Well, one of the reasons would be is that you don't want the people that are still living there to affect you and to show you things that you shouldn't be doing, and for you to pick up on their practices. Because remember, the whole reason why you're conquering those people is because of their sinfulness, because of them not following God. And you don't want to pick up on those pagan practices and their idol worship. So you've got to go in and clean that territory up so that that doesn't happen. All right. Well, chapters 23 and 24 actually record, we're talking about the last words of Joshua. These closing chapters record Joshua's final challenges to the leaders to keep the law and an exhortation to the people to serve the Lord. So once again, the people are being reminded that don't forget who God is. Don't forget that He is the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. He brought you out of slavery. He brought you here to this promised land that you did not pay for and earn, honestly. It was given to you. Yes, you had to go in and take care of the inhabitants. But don't forget who God is. Don't forget to keep those commandments in front of you. Don't forget to write them on the write it on the doorposts. Okay? Write it on your hands, bind it on your forehead, teach it to your kids as you walk, as you sit, as you eat. Talking about who God is, talking about what He's done. Don't forget that stuff. Another reminder to them to keep the law. It's funny how you have to keep reminding people of what they're supposed to do, right? You have to keep reminding people of what not to do. And we do that today, and it was no different back then. He had a final exhortation for them. Now let's put some meat on the bones. The conquest of the land is just following a simple divide and conquer strategy. And I explained earlier how Jericho was the key city to be able to go in and do that. They divided that land, and so you had the north and the south. Walked around the city for the 7 days and then blew the trumpets and shouted on that last day. This command, when you think about it, is a test to see if the people will recognize that a successful conquest must always come from God's power and not from their own abilities. And God's people passed that test that day with flying colors. They obeyed, they blew the trumpets, and the walls miraculously came down. Well, how do we flesh this out in our own lives? The book of Joshua teaches us that when it comes to fighting the battles of life and gaining spiritual victory, blessings come through obedience to God's commands. For you and me, this means that living by faith in accordance to God's directions. It means that active faith doesn't require that we understand all or any of what God is doing in our life. You don't need to understand. I don't need to understand. We just need only obey and to reap the blessings of that obedience. You think about just that statement in reference to Jericho, the walls falling in Jericho. The people, I'm sure, didn't understand, why am I walking around this wall for 7 days? But they need only obey And when they did that, they reaped the blessings. God required the people, and he requires us to attempt to do the impossible. And sometimes that sounds like a crazy idea. Humanly speaking, walking around the fortified city and the trumpets should have no effect. I mean, if we did that today, right, we'd get laughed at. We'd get laughed off the place if we did that today. But in God's realm, the impossible becomes the possible, and the people succeeded, and they gained the victory, God's victory. And just as he promised the Israelites victory, so he has also promised to give us the victory. And like the Israelites, well, we got to follow his terms. We have to trust God. We have to attempt the impossible by submitting to his directions. And we will watch the walls of a seemingly impossible situation come down. Well, life's lessons from Joshua: faithfulness is always a requirement for service. Serving others prepares you to lead others. Victory occurs when we let God fight our battles. You know, these days, I'm letting God fight the battle. I'm not going to get all up in that. I'm letting God fight the battle. Guidance from God for daily living comes from his word. So we got to be in the word to get that. We've got to be in that. That's us. Personal responsibility. I got to be in the word. And at times, we're going to have to take a stand for our beliefs. And living for God, well, that requires ongoing obedience. Doesn't stop today. It requires tomorrow and the next day and next week and next month and next year. It keeps on going until the day we see him face to face. Well, you know, there's a person that's in the story of Joshua. Her name is Rahab. You might have heard of her. She was a prostitute. And she was the chick who protected the two spies. You know, Joshua, it's interesting to me because Joshua, I think, learned, rather than send in 12 to the land to go check out, because he sent 2 spies to go check Jericho out. I think he might have learned, you know what? It didn't work so well for Mo when he sent 12 guys over to the promised land and 10 of them came back. I think 2's good. He sent 2 over there. And of course, just as they got inside the city, they went right to Rahab's house, the prostitute, which would be an unlikely thing. You would think, oh, well, what are they doing? Actually, I mean, if you're 2 new people coming to town, you're not going to go in, especially if you're spying it out. I don't think you're going to go to the middle and you're going to say, hey, we're just here to check you out because we're fixing to come in here and take y'all. You know, they went to the prostitute's house, and of course, word got back to the king, and he tried to find them, and she hid them on her roof. And of course, they made a deal with each other. We won't tell if you won't tell, and we'll save you. But you got to put this scarlet rag on the outside of your place so that we know that you're here. And any family you want, you better bring them. Because whoever's here will take you back safe and sound. And that's exactly what they did. They kept their promise. She kept her promise to them. And Rahab actually has a place in Bible history because of her courage. She was inspired by her faith in God's ability to deliver. She had heard about what God had done, to what the Israelites had done to other people and how God had been with the Israelites. She had heard that. She told the spies, I heard about your God. Okay. Her faith, it made her one of the only 2 women that are listed in the Hall of Faith in Hebrews 11. Her and Abraham's wife, Sarah. And then, of course, her descendants include David. And, of course, as you know, Jesus, or don't know, Jesus is in the lineage of David. Rahab is in that lineage. So, you know, sometimes we think that we have done things that God can never use us or work through us because of what we've done. History shows that that's not the case. So that was a little fun fact from the book of Joshua, Rahab. I sure hope you've enjoyed tonight's lesson. If you have, share it with a friend or a family member. If you have questions for me, or if you want to know something let me know. Message me. I don't care. I also have, and going to put this video on the Teaching Lady page, I have a closed Bible study group over there that many of you are a part of already. And I'll put the videos there as well for people to interact and talk with each other. And then that way, if you've got questions or you want to discuss something, we can discuss them over there. That's fine too. But thank you for joining me. I hope that these videos have been helpful. I know they have for me. When I'm reading this material, it helps me understand more about how number one, how the Bible's set up. But number two, to be able to understand the order of it and to understand the main characters of it. I hope in a simple way, as the authors put it, because sometimes I think, when we read it, it can become so overwhelming that we just say, you know what, I don't understand it, and we put it away. And then it gets dust. So I don't want that to happen to me, and I pray that doesn't happen to you either. So you have a good evening. Thanks for joining me. Hi, everybody, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.